The Stanley Cup playoffs are in full swing as the Florida Panthers and Carolina Hurricanes dominate in the East. Plus, we remember legendary broadcaster Bob Cole and look ahead to next week's NHL Award finalist announcements, all on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday, everyone, and thanks for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner from Locked On Flyers. I'm here each and every Friday with Gil Martin of Locked On Islanders. You can subscribe or follow the show for free over on YouTube. We're on the SiriusXM app or anywhere you listen to podcasts. You'll get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side and am a big fan of Monopoly Go. It's the mobile hit twist on the classic game Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. How is it going, Gil?
It's going well, except for the Islanders. That's the not in a good place with the team right now, but love the playoffs. Love this week of action. I mean, April is one of my favorite months on the sports calendar, if not my ultimate favorite month. So bring it.
It's a good one for sure. Before we get to your New York Islanders and the teams that are up 3-0 in their series, just want to talk a little bit about Bob Cole, a legendary Canadian hockey broadcaster who sadly passed away this week. And I think, it's always interesting for us, Gil, as Americans, knowing what to say about Bob Cole because he's such an institution in Canada. But, I think for me, knowing that for whatever happened with our teams and our hockey viewing, we always said, oh, but I wonder what the Bob Cole call of that sounded like, and as the internet became a thing, scouring for what his version of the call was. And I know for me as a Flyers person, the most iconic Bob Cole call for me was when the Flyers played the Soviet Red Army team and he had his infamous they're going home, call. But do you have any memories about Bob Cole?
Yeah, that one is in particular a great moment. And I guess there are just so many iconic moments that he covered. If there was a big game, very often he was covering it, especially come playoff time. So many Leafs games that he called over the course of his career. When I was in Michigan in school, we got Hockey Night in Canada from Windsor because it's right across the river from Detroit. So, got to watch a lot of games back then. Just, you knew if he was calling the game that A, he was going to do a great job, and B, if there was an important moment, he was there somehow. So, just an institution as a broadcaster, winner of the Foster Hewitt Award. So he's in the Hockey Hall of Fame, and it's just well-deserved. And certainly we send our condolences to his family and friends. He had a very distinguished and lengthy career.
Absolutely. Turning our attention to the Stanley Cup playoffs, two teams on the verge of winning their series in a sweep. Carolina and Florida are both up 3-0 in their respective series. I would say the Carolina story is so remarkable because this is a team that had a little bit of up and down in the season, but was primarily near the top of the division. But they just know how to buckle down and take it up a notch in the playoffs, like better than I think almost any team in the league, regardless of the final results. Like, you look at their first round action and it's just generally very good. But the story for me, for them, is Freddie Anderson, right?
Yeah, Anderson has been spectacular. And, you look at game 3, which took place Thursday night, and the Islanders outshot the Hurricanes, excuse me, they had more high danger chances, and yet Frederik Andersen was just outstanding. And, getting back to your first point, I think part of it is how well coached they are. Rod
Yeah.
Brind'Amour gets them to play disciplined hockey all the time. And I think the other factor is this is a team that kind of plays a playoff style all year long. So they're not making as big of an adjustment as maybe some of the other teams are around the league when the calendar shifts from the regular season to the playoffs.
Yeah, I think that's an absolutely fair point there. And Rod Brind'Amour is just like, to me, one of the best playoff coaches out there. And I really like, you have to wonder, is this the year for them?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So they haven't even officially yet closed out their first round series. But this is a talented team. This is a team that has depth. They made some great moves at the trade deadline. I mean, Jake Gensel, I mean, that's like the
I
perfect
know.
addition for this team. It's like exactly what they needed. So, yeah, they've come close so many times, but haven't quite gotten over that hump. Uh, I wouldn't bet against the Carolina Hurricanes. Let's put it that way.
Well, I think if the Florida Panthers have anything to say about it, they will be in that conversation, up 3-0 on the Tampa Bay Lightning. And this Battle of Florida has, I think, been a little bit more one-sided than we would have expected. But you can't say that Tampa isn't trying. They just, I
No.
think, are not where they have been in the past.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is a team that's not quite as deep as they were in the past. Some of their star players are a little older than they were, and I think their window is starting to close right now. And they made an attempt to go all in for one more run, so to speak, this year. But you get the feeling that, barring a miracle comeback, that the window is starting to close right now on the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Yeah, and speaking of that series, they had only one of two overtime games so far in these Stanley Cup playoffs. Of course, game two, where Florida won in overtime. Game two of the LA Kings versus Edmonton Oilers went to overtime, and it feels like a lot less than usual
It
to this
does.
point.
It does, and I don't like that, because to me, there is nothing more exciting than overtime playoff hockey, especially if your team is involved. Every time the puck comes up the ice when you're on offense, you're hoping that the game ends, and every time the puck goes into your own zone, you sort of exhale when your team finally clears the zone. Um, it is so intense and so tense that there is nothing like it in the sports world, nothing like playoff overtime hockey.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the other interesting trend so far is that we have no shutouts.
Yeah, and goaltending, such a big part of playoff hockey. You need your goaltender to steal you some games at some point if you're going to go on that long playoff run. And between the lack of overtime and the lack of shutouts, it's like something feels wrong. It just doesn't feel right. And I'm still waiting for that 3, 4, 5 overtime game. There's one every
Right.
year. I am still waiting for that. Knowing my luck, it'll be the Islanders in game 4. They'll go to 4 overtimes and then lose. But
Oh no. You got to be positive, Gil.
I
You got to
know.
be positive.
I'm just kind of kidding, ironically here, but yeah, I'm still waiting for that dramatic multiple overtime game, and I know we'll see a shutout before all is said and done. It's
I think so.
inevitable.
So I think the other big interesting, uh, I wouldn't call it a trend, but an interesting part of the playoffs so far, and maybe the most surprising in the least surprising way, is Vegas being up 2-0 over Dallas at this point. I mean, I absolutely thought this was Dallas's year. I thought they'd put everything together so almost perfectly in the regular season. They had all cylinders firing, and this Vegas Golden Knights defending Stanley Cup champion team said, maybe not.
Look, you got to give credit to Vegas. Dallas, I am disappointed in the way they're starting off the playoffs.
Yeah.
But we talked earlier about Carolina being sort of built for the playoffs. I think Vegas is too. The fact that they're so deep that they can roll four lines on you and wear you down. If you're playing them once on a Tuesday, that's okay. It's difficult. But if you're playing them 4, 5, 6 games in a row, that really does take a toll on you. Now you add the fact that they are the defending Stanley Cup champions. They know what it takes to win. You want to talk about circumventing the salary cap? That's a different conversation. But,
Right.
this
The
team
Mark
knows.
Stone of it all.
Yeah, exactly. But this team knows how to win in the playoffs, and their style, the way they wear you down, is very, it's conducive to winning playoff series.
Absolutely. All right. Well, there's so many more series to talk about and interesting storylines for these playoffs, and we are going to get to them coming up next. When you're drafting your fantasy team, do you ever wish you could handpick the best stars for your business team? If you're building your talent roster, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire in all one place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills when you can do it all with Indeed. Find top talent fast with Indeed's suite of powerful hiring tools like matching, assessments, and virtual interviews. And hate waiting, Indeed's US data shows over 80% of Indeed employers find quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job. With Indeed, matching as soon as you sponsor a post, you get a short list of quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your job description. Boom, it's hiring at warp speed. And now with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that meet your hiring criteria. Visit Indeed.com/locked on to start hiring now. That's Indeed.com/locked on. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed. So continuing our look through the NHL playoff series, I think, the other series that unfortunately has an interesting storyline is the Vancouver Canucks and Nashville Predators. And this series is tied at one game apiece, but obviously the biggest story of note here is the injury to Thatcher Demko and him being out.
Yeah, I mean, talk about terrible timing. If you're the Vancouver Canucks, here's a goalie who played, well all season, was one of the reasons this team had such a a great season, and to lose your goalie now is just
Yeah.
very difficult, and the depth just isn't there.
Yeah, and I think that, this is a season, and I know we've talked about it many times. Nashville was my surprise pick
Hmm.
at the very beginning of the season, and now they have an opportunity to potentially win a playoff series here. And I think that this is a team that when they put it all together, they really put it all together. When they can't, it's a complete disaster. They are like a
Yeah.
very bipolar team, I think, in the grand scheme of things. But I think that, winning game two was really important for them, and the way they won it was really important for them. And now they've got 2 games at home to really make a statement here, starting tonight, for game 3. And this is just a huge opportunity for the Preds.
It really is, and you add to the fact that the Preds are sort of a surprise team, and that they're a year ahead of where most experts thought they would be. There's a lot more pressure right now on the Vancouver Canucks than there is on the Nashville Predators.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think, obviously we do have to talk about the Boston Toronto series, which is, I think, one of the most brutal series of the playoffs, just in terms of the intensity, in terms of the rivalry here. Boston currently up 2-1. I think that game 3 was pretty devastating for the Leafs, even though there's still ample opportunity there. It just felt like, this is when the naysayers come out of the woodwork for the Leafs, right?
There is so much pressure on the
Yeah.
Toronto Maple Leafs. And, when your franchise hasn't won the Stanley Cup since 1967, when there were still 6 teams in the NHL, when you have the top end talent that the Toronto Maple Leafs have, and you're playing in the media capital of Canada, there is just a lot of pressure on this team. And they drew a very tough opponent in the Boston Bruins. Jeremy Swayman is playing rather well.
Yep.
This is just like the next game Saturday really is a must win for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And you just get the feeling that if things start to go wrong, it's in the back of their head psychologically. Here we go again. And that is a big, big hurdle for the Maple Leafs to overcome. They don't just have to play the Boston Bruins, they also have to play and oppose those expectations and that pressure.
Right. And the fact that they split the games in Boston and now, Boston comes in and wins the first game in Toronto. I think like after that split, you're like, oh, okay, they split. They can come home and get it done. Boston was like, nope, don't think so. And so, especially given that this is a home game for Toronto, I think like there's a lot more on the line here.
They have got to win this game. I mean, look, can they win 3 straight if they lose it? Sure, but the odds of doing that, especially the way Swayman is playing, they become very long, and the level of pressure would get ratcheted up even more.
Yeah, that game's on Saturday. Looking at the two series that are tied, right? Well, one of the other series that is tied right now, Jets versus Avalanche. I think that game one was
Oh,
absolute insanity. First off,
totally.
but I really like the way that Colorado was able to settle after that game. After that game one, which was absolutely bonkers, Winnipeg wins in a high scoring game. Colorado settled down and was able to win game two pretty solidly. And I think that was important for them.
It was very important for them. And I think, one of the advantages the Avalanche have over the Jets is they have more playoff experience. I think if the situations were flipped, I don't know if Winnipeg would have as easy a time sort of recovering from that kind of a game, just because the Avalanche have so much more playoff experience up and down that roster. So, this is going to be, first of all, that game one was so entertaining. And this is
Oh my
going to be,
goodness.
yeah, I mean, that was, if you're a hockey fan and you didn't like that game, I mean, unless you're one of those people who likes outstanding low scoring games. But to me, this series is one of the better series out there. And the Avalanche, like I said, they've got experience. They've got a cup under their belts a few years back. Winnipeg, kind of underrated and flies under the radar a little bit. But what a great series this is going to be. I think this one easily could go 7.
Yeah, I think so too. But of course, the next two games are in Colorado. The first one is tonight, and I think it is going to be a decisive game in this series. It's like, can Winnipeg come into Colorado, given everything, and win this first game and make a statement? I think that's going to be key for them. And then even if they don't win the game, can they at least make a really strong effort here so that they can carry that into a game four also in Colorado? I think that is going to be the key for Winnipeg here.
Yeah, they've got to at least split. You got to figure they have to
Mhm.
win at least one of the two in Colorado, ideally. Although, because Winnipeg does have home ice advantage, 2 of the last 3 will be in Winnipeg, so that also would help them if they don't manage the split.
Yeah, I think so. I think that really is what needs to happen there. The other series out west tied at 1, the Oilers and LA Kings. We mentioned their overtime game in game 2 for the Kings to win over Edmonton. And that was such a huge win for the Kings because you look at game 1 where Edmonton just came out firing, right? And it looked like, oh, this is the Edmonton team we've expected all along. And, despite the final score of 7-4, it just felt like, okay, Edmonton is making a statement here, right? Game 2, the Kings were like, not so much, and I think like that effort by the Kings in Edmonton was was so tremendous, and I think kind of could put some doubt in the Oilers' minds, especially as they head to LA for games 3 and 4.
Yeah, and you always talk about rivalries and the way the playoffs are set up. They're trying to establish rivalries. 3 years in a row, these teams are going at it in the playoffs. I love it. There's already bad blood because you're in the division.
Yep.
This is, this is what this system, and it's flawed. Don't get me wrong, but the good part of this system is having two teams like this meet 3 years in a row in the playoffs.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Of course, the final series we haven't talked about, the New York Rangers up 2-0 to the Washington Capitals. And clearly game 1 was a lot more dominant than game 2. But I just feel like this is maybe a 5-game series here where they'll split in Washington and then the Rangers will go home and win it.
Probably. I mean, look, the Capitals had a very big minus goal differential. They started slowly. They got hot at the end, made the playoffs. Congratulations to them for that. But the Rangers, President's Trophy winners, Igor Shesterkin looking rather strong in goal. It's going to be tough to overcome them. But, the Capitals could surprise. If they win both games in Washington, I think all of a sudden the mood turns, but we'll see. That's a
Right.
tall order. That's a tall
Yep.
order.
Absolutely. All right. Well, the NHL is going to start announcing their award finalists starting next Monday. We're going to get into next week's announcement coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. We've all been there, either as a player or a fan. It's halftime and the scoreboard is not looking good. You're feeling low, not sure you or your team can pull out a win. But that's when you dig deep, lift up your head, and say to yourself, time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heists, and take as much of my friends' money as I possibly can. That's right, the smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone anytime, with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. There's so much to do. You can play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards, make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball, and charge other players rent for your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests and in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play.
So, like I just said, the NHL is starting their award finalist announcements on Monday, beginning with the Vezina Trophy. And I think it's always like controversial, some of these award announcements, but I think with the Vezina, there might not be as much controversy there. But what do you think?
Yeah, I think the Vezina may not have as much controversy as some of the other awards. And I think there are some familiar faces that are going to be part of the finalists again this year.
Yeah, I think, Connor Hellebuck for
Yeah.
Winnipeg, it just feels like it's his to lose. And you might have Demko in there getting a bunch of votes, I would say. But other than that, like, I mean, who are you gonna pick, really?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, last year we knew it was Linus Olmark. He had the numbers
Yeah.
across the board. But to me, Hellebuck has to be the favorite, and he's been close, and he's been one of the best goaltenders in the league before. I think it's his turn, but we'll see.
Yeah, and he already got the Jennings trophy, so I think that, yeah, this one is a no-brainer. But on Tuesday, we get the Calder Trophy finalist announcements. And man, I don't know what is going to happen here. It should be Connor Bedard
Yeah. Yeah.
to win it, but who are your other finalists here?
Yeah, that's gonna be a tough one, I think, because I mean Bedard, everybody knew from the beginning he was sort of, the favorite. I think he's still going to win it. So,
Right.
it almost becomes like it's an honor to be nominated if you're not Connor Bedard.
Right. I mean, you look at Brock Faber from the
Yes.
Wild. I think he's definitely going to be a finalist, but if you wanted to ask me who the third finalist will be, I could not tell you, to be
It
honest.
would be tough. It would be tough to pick the third finalist. Faber definitely deserves to be one of the three.
Yeah. Yeah. And then on Wednesday, we have the Norris Trophy. And I think that it's like there's a 1A, 1B situation here for me with Quinn Hughes and Roman Yossi. But I'm just wondering, like, A, who's the third nominee? And is it Quinn Hughes's award to lose?
I would go with Quinn Hughes. I mean, Roman Yossi has also had an outstanding season, so no, definitely he deserves to be a finalist. Third finalist is going to be a little tougher though.
Yeah, I just don't know. Like, you say like Cale Makar by default.
Right, right.
Maybe,
But is that on
maybe
reputation or is that on,
right. Well,
yeah,
sometimes these awards are based on reputation, so if you have to fill a 3rd spot, like, you can't really argue with it, especially given that Quinn Hughes feels like the presumptive winner here, like, doesn't matter, but, we'll see what the voters say in that one. Thursday, we get the Masterton Trophy. We're not gonna make predictions on that, but all of the team's nominees are out there, and they are all worthy award winners there. Friday, we get the Jack Adams Award, and to me, this is one of the more interesting things because I think earlier in the season, we might have had different nominees, but when the season wrapped up and we saw how the playoffs wound up, I think that, to me, Spencer Carberry deserves this award, but I don't know if he'll win.
Yeah, I don't know if he'll win either, and it will be interesting to see who ends up getting nominated. I mean, it's do you go? Is Rick Tocchet part of this equation?
Yeah.
You know,
He is, and I think he will probably win. I just think
right,
Spencer Carberry deserves it more, given the dire circumstances of the Capitals this season. I think Tocchet took a team that maybe didn't have as high expectations this year for sure, but had the personnel to get it done.
right,
Whereas, like, I think Washington is seen as a team on their last legs and, you know, didn't even have a shot at making the playoffs, and they did, and they got it done at the right time, peaked at the right time. They had a lot of fill-in personnel that Carberry had to put together, like Frankenstein together to make a team, and and to me, that's why he should win it. You could also make an argument for Andrew Brunette in Nashville. But I just really I'm on Team Carberry for this award, even though I don't think he's going to actually win it.
yeah. What about Rick Bonus?
I don't know because I just feel like so much of that team's success rides with Hellebuck.
Yeah.
Like, how much of it was the coaching? I don't
Hmm.
know.
Hmm.
I can't answer that. It could be very much or very little, but I don't think his coaching in particular stood out.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I think he'll get some votes. Whether he'll be a finalist or not, we shall see.
Yeah, absolutely. The other awards we'll get to next week as the finalist announcements come the following week, including the Hart Trophy, which is a whole other discussion. But we'll get to that one next week, and I'm sure our fellow hosts on Locked On NHL will talk about it some next week as well. But that will do it for today's show. Thanks so much for listening. Gil will be back on Monday talking to hosts from teams in the playoffs, I presume, about what's going on with their teams. We'll be back next Friday to dissect the week that was. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus national shows covering every league like this very program. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Have a great weekend, everyone.